All right. Hello again. Welcome back to the Changing the Narrative podcast. I'm your co-host, Dr. Gabriel Warren, along with Carl Benson. And today we have a special guest here, Xavier Reed, who we're excited to talk to and have some conversations about how he's changing the narrative here in the Twin Cities area. So Xavier, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with the two of you.
Absolutely. Well, I know we had a chance to participate on a panel here recently, so I know a little bit more about some of the things you're doing to impact the community, but can you start by just kind of letting the listeners know a little bit more about who you are and some of the things you're doing in the area?
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, Xavier Reed. I am, Minnesota. I've grown up here. This is home for me. Grown up in the Brooklyn Park area. What I currently do right now is I am a principal at Wayzata Central Middle School. That is one of three middle schools that we have in the school district. My school is the largest of the three. We have about, we're getting close to about 1,600 students in our middle school. We're grades 6 through 8. And I've been there, this is my third year at that building. Prior to that, I worked in the Mounds View School District. I was an associate principal. I was also an equity specialist. That's kind of where, I would say I laid my roots as far as being an educator and jumping in education. And part of my story is that, education was not what I did initially coming out of college. I went the corporate route and worked at Target Corporate for about 2.5 years. And I was in sourcing, a sourcing analyst. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I just knew, it wasn't filling my bucket the way that I wanted, my career, my job, the first thing that I do coming out of college. And so, that's when I went the education route, and, the rest is history. But, that was my approach into education.
Right on. So speaking a little bit more, because I just want to dig into the education piece, not only being a principal, but just the importance of, or how do you see the importance of being a Black male as a principal or in the school system and in education with our young people?
I think being a Black leader is important in almost every space. It's important to see us at the top and in these positions. When it comes to a school, schools are unique. It's a very, unique thing where I always say, as an educator or as a, working in a middle school building, we get a chance to see every career, and where it starts. Every career is represented in our student body. We have future doctors, we have future lawyers, we have the future, police officers, we have the future firefighters. All of them are in our school right now. And so when you talk about the importance of having myself or, some of my other colleagues that are leading the buildings and are Black, it's the development of the next generation that we're leading. And so we get a chance to be able to interact. We get a chance to be able to, help to mold. We get a chance to be able to grow alongside of these individuals in our school. And so, being able to be that presence that they look to, and they know, like, that's my principal. My principal is a Black man, and who brings himself to the space in an authentic way every day. I think it says a lot, and it's important that there's more examples, in that way. Otherwise, it feels, I don't want being a Black principal to continue to be something that is so out of the norm. I want it to be something that feels right, and that feels like, I'm just one of the many.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up, if I could, Dr. Warren. I've always wondered this, I guess. Have you ever had a conversation with a student about being a Black male principal? Or is that something that I know that we admire, I guess, as adults, but I'm wondering, I guess, from the standpoint of a child's perspective, have you ever had that conversation, or is that something that you would welcome?
Absolutely. I'm very transparent with my students, with my staff, with families, when opportunities arise. And so, just talking about that with some of my students, especially, as I was trying to become a principal, I had many students that I was working with, in a couple groups that I helped supported for boys specifically. A lot of the boys were boys of color, Black and brown students in our building, and those conversations are just talking about just some of the hoops that you have to jump, some of the challenges that may not be the same for the next person. My road, my journey is not the same as some of my colleagues, and I think that it's not unique only to education. I think it's unique to Black leadership, and it's just you hear similar stories, you hear similar things that come up, with many people that you talk with. I think one of the most refreshing things that I've been able to do, and I know this is bird walking from the student conversation, but was the first time I got an opportunity to visit the National Principal Conference, which takes place in the summer every year. And, there's so many principals, there's thousands of principals that go to that conference. And, being able to speak to, Black principals from the South, the West Coast, the East Coast, other areas in the Midwest, it's very interesting, just the conversations and how similar, but we had never met each other before. We had never, this is the first conversation, first time meeting each other, and yet, some of our experiences have been, very similar. And some of that is both, the good and the bad, but it's unique. And I think for me, it was important because of that affinity that you're able to build. But as far as students, students definitely, I've had those conversations, especially if there's something that they're struggling with, as far as just navigating how to be a student, how to be prepared for some of these things. We've definitely had those conversations.
Very cool. Thank you.
That's good, man. And to kind of piggyback off of your last answer there, you kind of mentioned that there's different hoops you have to jump through. There's challenges, there's barriers with being a Black leader, but then specifically being a Black male leader. So what motivates you to keep going and keep doing what you do every day?
Yeah, I think what motivates me really, and really where the fire was being lit for me is as I was coming out of college. I think like many of us, obviously you're in a different space coming out of college than 10, 15 years down the line. But for me, that was when I was really starting to notice the societal inequities. And it was also the time where I moved back, like, closer to home, back to Brooklyn Park, back to Minneapolis. And so, running into people that I grew up with, hearing about people that I grew up with, and, that, maybe their situation wasn't good. Maybe they were in jail. Maybe they, were dead, unfortunately. And really trying to put together and piece together, and have I had a very reflective conversation just with myself, just about, why am I in this position, and where, and why is this person not where they need to be, or why are all of these people not where, in positive positions. And you start to think about the systemic aspect of what we live in and the systemic change that has to happen. And so for me, as I reflected, I felt like the best thing that I could do is to teach and to help to mold kids, whether that was in schools, whether that was coaching. We had a little conversation before getting started about AAU. I started an AAU program with my dad for girls basketball when I was at Target. We did that for 5 years. It was all based about, just giving girls opportunities. Just so happened that a lot of the girls on our team were girls of color, which, there's lots of data, there's lots of statistics around, young Black women, young Black girls, and just not being involved, and there's just a big picture to it. And so when it comes down to my why, and it comes down to why this work matters so much to me, it comes down to changing those societal inequities. And there's so many societal inequities, and they start in school buildings. The data that you see in many schools, aligns, very much close to the data that you see, in the real world, whether it's, home ownership or, the job market. Just there's so many different things that you can point to and have a direct line to, where that started. And so I want to have a ripple effect and help to change that.
Very cool. That's awesome. Well, I'll shift it up a little bit, and little more a deeper thought as relates to sort of the media's perception. And in what ways do you see the portrayal of black male or black male masculinity in the media specifically contributing to the misconception of black men that are being feared or having a lack of general control? Just what do you see as the challenge with media in that space?
Mhm. Yeah, I think you definitely see it. I think, whether it's black male, masculinity, I also think that there's a lot of toxic masculinity traits that we see come through at school, and that's where there's a lot of opportunity to process with young men about some of the choices that they're making and some of the things that they're doing. I think that something that I've, always kind of had the battle as a black male is just being feared and being, someone who I guess looks opposing and seen as being dangerous, seen as being, and these are not things that align with my history. They don't align with anything that I was raised to be. But yet, when I walk into a space, sometimes that's how I'm received in that way. And so, when you're a leader, I think there's obviously there's a level of power that you have in a position. There's a level of authority that you have in a position. And I think for some people, that's scary to them, is that, having a black male in a position like that, is that, somehow they're not going to use that in the right way, or they're going to, have, this anger that comes out, or this different personality that comes out. And that's something that's really hard, because I think as professionals, I would say, many of my colleagues who also share a similar walk, a similar journey as me, we work hard at being up to date on the current research. We are, constantly wanting to build relationships with the people around us, whether it's students, staff, families, and trying to build that equity. But when that narrative still is there, is still there after all of the work that we put in and all of the growth that we make as individuals, that becomes challenging. And it's something that, when we talk about disrupting things, that's something that we have to consistently try to disrupt, is just those false narratives about being feared. And I do think that has been it's been a great opportunity for myself and for other males in education, to help to have, like I said, a lot of processing conversations with young men who come into space and come into school sometimes thinking that the version of what it means to be a man is what they see on TV, what they see, in movies, and that it has to be, something that you gotta prove how tough you are. And that's not what it is. And so, we talk about those things, and and that's why it's important for us to be in space with our students and with kids, so that we can help to address those things.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I really like your answer to that, man. And I'm thinking about just a follow-up question to you, that how do we how do we change some of that? Like the things you just mentioned here, and the way that media is portraying black men, and the societal pressures and things that we all face as black men. So if you were able to kind of speak to a little bit about, from your perspective, how you feel like we could do our part to help change some of that, how would you go about doing that?
I think as a father, I'm a father of two children. I have a son, he's 8, Leo, and I have a daughter who just turned 7 last week, and her name is Rain. And so, that they're a great example of equity within my own household. For my son, there's a different approach, and it's a different journey that he has to walk than his sister. It just is what it is. And so, for me, I really want to help raise him in a way where he feels loved, he feels cared for, he feels safe, he feels like he's able to express himself. I think going back to the topic about toxic masculinity, I think that there's definitely a generation before us where there wasn't a lot of dads that were maybe giving hugs and kisses and being, just that's I've taken a whole different approach because I want him to be able to be able to express all of his feelings and not have to have anything pent up. I think in our community, especially coming from a school standpoint, something that we see and have seen lately is really the high level and extreme cases of mental health that all students are showing across all races, all backgrounds. I think that the extra layer of it for our Black students is that there's still that idea that maybe we don't need to address this, or that we're not going to talk about that. And so for me, as a father, I talk about those kind of things all the time with my children, and I talk about it with my staff as well, and just open about those things. For my daughter, I think, making sure that she's got confidence in herself, that she, is able to, speak up in space and not be silenced. I think that happens a lot, for young Black women, and I want her to be a strong presence and be able to do those things. And so I think those, I gave those examples because I think that it starts to address the issues that you're talking about, and it starts to take a different approach, and it starts to have our babies show up differently, in space once they continue to develop, and that just may be a different, maybe it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It might just be different from what the way that maybe we were raised in our generation, and so, but I do see the mental health piece of some of these pieces and some of the societal expectations being linked to that, because I think that what comes up, especially for Black men, when you're not able to be the breadwinner and when you're not able to be the provider, is where we see sometimes mistakes happen. We see some challenges happen in our communities, and it just becomes a revolving door. And so we got to address that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, if I handed you a magic wand and I said, what misconception of our society about Black men, what misconception about Black men would you eradicate immediately? What one thing, if you could say, hey, this is that one thing that I could do with this magic wand, a misconception about Black men, what would it be?
Yeah, I thought, this is a really, that's a tough one thing. But I think if there was one thing, it would be to disrupt the narrative that we're less than. I think that is a huge one, because for generations we've been seen as less than, and that goes back to slavery, that goes back to pre-slavery, it goes back to all of those things that we're continuing to try to overcome. And so my question is, why can't we be considered the standard? And why is that such a problem? And so, as I was reflecting more about it, I think about, just the joy and the confidence that our community, and it sent shockwaves through our community when President Obama was elected. It was the president of the United States, and for so many people, to think that a Black man was going to lead this country, that wasn't in, I never believed that I could be, in that position. And so, being able to see that happen, that was huge. I also think about, on from a different approach, but, growing up and being a big, cartoon and comic book and superhero guy, and not ever having, a Black superhero that was ever, around. And then fast forward, 20, 25 years later, and you see the impact of Black Panther. You see the impact of that movie and what it did for our culture, to be celebrated by everybody. It wasn't just big for, this was the biggest, movie, superhero movie of all time. And going back to my original question, why can't we be the standard? Why can't that be the standard? And so I just think that opportunities need to happen. I think that misconceptions need to be addressed, and and the doors just need to continue to be open for more people.
Mm,
Thank you.
perfect, man. I like that response, man.
Yeah.
So what does success look like for you, from your perspective, thinking about the spaces that you're in and the things that you try to do from day to day? What does success look like?
Yeah, I think I think success, the way that I view success is always going to probably ebb and flow. I think, something that is consistent is every day is an opportunity for me, when I walk through the halls of the school building to connect with a different student. And I think that, part of the unique opportunity that I have as a Black male principal is I get to, be able to, number one, for the Black boys and girls, Black and brown boys and girls that are in my building, I get to be, someone who they can look at and see as an inspiration. And I can be an inspiration for all students. It's not just them, but directly, they can look at me and they can see hopefully a piece of themselves, in me. I think for all students, what I can do is, address, the way that I show up and the way that I want to be welcoming. I want them to feel good. I want them to, I want to greet them and say good morning with a smile on my face. And I want to challenge every misconception that they may have, from the media portrayal. I want them to be able to see me as a human and as someone who's positive in their life, because the way things are portrayed in the media is so strong. I want them to experience Mr. Reed and be able to question what they're seeing on TV and what they're seeing said. That's not, that's not how, and I'm not the only person in my building. We've been able to hire you know, I forget what number where we're at, but I think we have, I think 7 or 8 Black men in our building. And I think every day we have an opportunity to challenge the narrative. And so for me, that feels great. And I think it goes a long way because, like I said, there's so many different careers that are represented in our school building. And that's going to send, shockwaves, across whatever career they go into, whatever they do in life. And it's going to challenge, on those narratives.
Very cool. A common theme we have with the men we interview is kind of their community give back to some degree. So clearly you're in a school and we know what you're doing on that professional level. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do in community outside of the school?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. For me, it's been I was an athlete, a sports guy. That's been something that's always been a part of my life. So coaching is definitely one way where I've been able to connect with a lot of young people and continue to stay connected with them. And so that was kind of my dipping the toe into education was through coaching, and so have continued to do that on different levels. Now that having the responsibility of a principal, I'm not, coaching at high school or anything like, or AAU anymore. But, as I mentioned, I do have 2 children, of my own. And, they got me out there, doing, basketball and soccer. I don't even know how to coach soccer, but I'm out there. And there's just more opportunities for, to be a part of the growth of different kids and the development of different kids and in our community. And never, it's never, for me, it's never about anything other than trying to be a positive presence. And so I definitely do have interest in doing more work. One of the other things that I've done on the side, and we got to get back into it, is being able to help to provide space for Black educators to be able to connect. So it was like 2018, I believe. We started a group called the Black Educators Emerging, and this group was 30 to 40 different educators from around the metro, all different school districts. And the way it got started was, I was newly into the role of associate principal, and I was the only Black associate principal in my school district at the time. And so I'm sitting in space, and we're talking about equity issues, and I don't see anybody else around me who can really speak to these things. And so for me, I felt like it was important to connect with others, but because of the challenges of the lack of Black educators that we have in the school systems here in Minnesota, you got to go to different districts because we're all spread out. And so I just started to pick up the phone, kind of cold calling, going on different websites and finding people. And I was able to find some of my closest friends that way eventually, just from connecting. And that's been a huge support, I think, for myself, and for others who have been in education. And that's something I want to grow and want to continue to do. I just want to find ways where we can make it more sustainable.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Man, that's really, really good, man. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we need that community and that support, because when you're in spaces where you're one of the only or one of the few, then you gotta have someone you can be able to kind of relate to and talk to and find support and guidance. So that's good to hear that you're doing that, man. So my next question is it's a piggyback off of the earlier question Carl asked you, but it's a little spin to it. So, you've told us about what you would like to eradicate, like that misconception. So the follow-up to that would be, if you had the ability to sit down with someone and they were interviewing you and they were like, okay, Xavier, what should the narrative be about being a Black man in today's culture? What would that narrative be from your perspective?
I think, for me, Black men have been, I would say the most important people in my life that have helped to mold me. My father and my grandfather, were very vital in raising me and giving me an example for who I am today. And I think without them, I don't know where I would be. And so when I kind of drill down to the narrative about them is that they were loving, they had high expectations, they were supportive, they were consistent, and they cared for everybody. It wasn't just me. My grandfather was a man who he would give you the shirt off his back, and my father's the same way, and would continue to do that. And so I continue to try to serve in those ways as well, and try to continue that legacy and be able to do that. And so that's how I would want everybody to see Black men, is that we're loving, we're not dangerous, we are approachable, we want what's best for everybody, and want to support. And so I would really want it to be kind of a flipping of what the narrative currently is, and it has been for so much time. And just kind of to my point earlier, we need opportunities, we need the doors open, we need to be able to help to disrupt those narratives.
So how can people follow you? What are your social media platforms? Let's tell people, when they listen to this podcast, you're probably going to try to find out who you're at and what you're all about. Tell us how folks can find you.
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Xavier Reed. You can definitely find me on there. I'm on Twitter, at Xavier Reed _. And I'm also on Instagram as well. So I would love to connect with others, and continue to be in space. And, that's something that I am looking to do more of, is be able to to be able to have opportunities to continue to grow these messages and connect with other individuals, especially individuals, maybe you're struggling and need that affinity. I would love to be a support for you in that way. So, you can definitely find me.
Awesome.
Appreciate you.
Well, Xavier, man, this has been great, man. I know that, 30 minutes or so is not a long time to really, dig into these really deep conversations, but, I do think it gives us a glimpse about being able to get into the mind of what it means to be a Black man and really how we're trying to make an impact. So thank you for what you're doing in the community, man. And thank you for being a guest on the podcast. I know that this will be a really good episode for people to listen to. So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks to you.